When I'm drunk, I feel like more free.
I mean, no one is stopping you to start drinking. You can start drinking right now.
Start drinking at 10 or
It is 6:30 p.m. Where I am right now. So technically you can be on my time zone and you can just drink wherever you are.
oh my god. So you can drink all day if you're thinking you are in a different time zone, right? Yeah, that's good.
Always. Yeah. I have these snacks that I bought from the Korean store, and
Uh-huh.
I'm sad that I can't eat them because,
Why?
we're recording. Because I'll be
You,
making chewing noises, and that would not be very nice.
the, you never know, right? Maybe our audience like the what's the word?
ASMR.
ASMR. Yeah. From your eating, and then like there'll be after a while people were joining to say, I want to hear that person eating. The crunchy, all the amazing music I'm hearing, and at the background some people are talking, but it doesn't matter. So that's all I want to hear.
Okay, but you know what? Let me just show you some of the snacks I actually bought, though.
Uh-huh.
I have no idea what this is. It's like rice crackers. You know those
Yeah.
like puffy rice cracker thingies?
Oh.
This looks very Japanesey.
Yeah, it looks
Um,
really Japanese style.
so I'm very into healthy snacks right now. So I got this one called the black bean oven baked crackers. It probably sounds
Wow.
disgusting, but it actually tastes really good. It's got
Wow.
it's got 13.5 grams of protein
Wow.
in 100 grams, according to this packaging.
That's good.
Oh, what's really different
Yeah.
in the UK is that when you have like foreign products,
Uh-huh.
it doesn't look like they match exactly from the original packaging of like the nutrition value to the translated value. But maybe it's because the translated one is per 100 grams and the
Yeah,
original
yeah.
packaging is for like a different amount. Like the original one says 45 grams. So maybe
Oh,
that's
so
why
so they do a
it's different.
conversion to make sure that the ratio is the same, so they can
I
compare like
have
apple
no
to apple in a
I
way.
have no idea, man. I don't even know if that's correct. So I'm just gonna go with the language that I can understand. So if it's not true, somebody is gonna get sued.
Sounds good.
And then I have these dry roasted edamame beans. God,
Oh,
I sound like a fucking deer.
you,
Um,
you sound like you're from Japan.
and then we have this five spice dry tofu package for snacks.
Here we go.
It's got it's got like 21.7 grams of protein. Oh my gosh, it's got 2.49 grams of salt. That is
Hmm.
over 1 day of
Yeah,
intake of salt.
yeah.
If I eat this package,
Healthy snacks. Here
I
you
could
go.
die.
Here you go.
I could die.
Do you believe in healthy
Um,
snacks?
what do you mean? Do I believe in healthy snacks? Of course I do.
That's good. Yeah.
Hold on, I'm just trying to fix my mic. Something is going on.
Hmm.
Do you hear anything?
Not really.
Okay, maybe it's just me.
Are you hearing like inner voice, the inner channeling?
Maybe it's a ghost.
Harry Potter.
Okay, should we start? Let's start.
Let's.
All
So,
right.
hello, hello. What's our topic today?
Actually, first, welcome to Pondering
Okay.
Pandas,
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
podcast, a podcast where we ponder about the confusing modern world and try to make sense of it all. We are your host. He is Ryan.
Oh, he is Jayden.
Hello. If that was really confusing, that
Yeah.
is on you. Our pondering topic and convo for the day is called
Immigration.
immigration, and then we might make this into a two-part series. Just depends how long this conversation is going to go.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you remember the first time you hopped onto the plane and then first landed in foreign soil? I
Yeah.
think our timelines is a little bit different
Hmm.
because for you, you arrived relatively older
Yeah. Much
in
older.
your life.
Yeah.
And for me, I was basically a child. And I think for myself, comparing China to Canada when I first landed,
Yeah.
it the first thing that hit my face, really, and it was like I think it was like around March or like end of February timeline. So it was like quite cold
Yeah, it's
at that
cold.
time. And the cold, crisp, fresh air just hit my face so
Hmm.
hard. I was like, oh my gosh, like, what is this
Place.
nice air? Like, what is going on? Like, why is it also so cold? Like, this type of cold I have never felt before. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, I don't know. It's just like a in your bones type of cold. So it was
Oh,
just quite
really?
different in terms of when we first landed.
Yeah.
And that was one of the very first things that I remembered. And then the streets, I remember,
Hmm.
um, was empty. There was no one walking on it except for us because we didn't have a car. So we were basically walking everywhere. I think my parents hired, you know, those like pickup people when they
Uh-huh.
pick you up from the airport
Yeah,
in
yeah,
a
yeah.
foreign land or something and
Yeah,
they
yeah,
hold
yeah.
signs. Yeah, it was one of those. I don't know what they're called, but yeah, she took us everywhere. She took us to the bank, she took us to the hotel and then like
Really?
got us settled. Yeah, there's other family friends within the area apparently, so then we went over to their houses. But
Hmm.
yeah, the
Hmm.
streets were empty except for us. We would just walk and I don't remember which hotel it was. According to my mom, I was being a bad child and I decided to just sit on her foot on in the middle of walking because I was like,
Jesus.
no, I do not want to walk anymore
Too much
because
working.
there was too much walking and we didn't have a car. And then I think that's why like it got my parents like, okay, let's go buy ourselves a car. Like it is a lot of walking. So it was
Yeah.
just something that
So
we're not used to
how
back in China
how much
cuz
later after you like have the working and all stuff? Like how many days after you decided to have a car together?
oh my God, I can't tell you, man. Those days were all bunched up together in my brain. Like I can't tell you when they decided to get a car, but
Okay, so it's squeezed into like one moment or whatever, you know. So
yeah, like one finger snap, and then that's basically what happened. And yeah, those were like the very first things that I really noticed. Our first few weeks of arriving in Canada.
hmm.
Oh, and the language. Everything was in English.
Yeah.
So I was like low key freaking out. So I don't know how my parents were freaking out because you
Uh-huh.
know
Do they
they don't read 1 ounce, not 1 ounce of English.
Oh,
So they basically poured entire responsibility towards me. So I have no idea how they're able to be so brave.
yeah. So were you an English speaker when you were here?
No, so I went to international school in China
Mhm.
and I only knew very little English, just like vocabularies when we're in grade one. We learn how, like, you know, just English vocabularies, and that's it. We haven't even figured out how to put it into sentences yet.
Hmm.
So there was like a few things that just I was like, okay, I could figure out like certain words, but I
Wow.
haven't figured out how to work it into a sentence. So
Hmm.
going to school
Yeah.
was a disaster for me because I went from class rep in my grade and my English teacher, I don't know if I shared this with you guys, but my English teacher at the time, I was in grade 1 in the boarding school in China,
Hmm.
international school, and in the morning we would have classes before breakfast. And
Seriously.
you
Wow.
yeah, so then there is like English class or like, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
every day before breakfast would be a different class. And then when there was English, I remember
Hmm.
that my English teacher just wouldn't show up.
Really?
And the day before, she would tell me to like,
Uh,
okay, just go over these vocabularies with your classmates, and
okay.
I'll just see you later, later in the day, like the next day. So now thinking about it, I think she was just sleeping in, you know?
Yeah,
She was like, okay,
yeah.
this person could just do my job.
Now we're thinking that's relatable.
Yeah. I was like, wow, child labor, I was
Child, yeah,
like,
exactly.
and I didn't get paid, but at the time I was like, okay, like I will
But
do what
but
you're
you
telling
got
me to
you got the
do.
honor and you got the trust from the teacher, right? That's all you
Yeah,
can
but
do.
now I moved to Canada. I don't know jack shit, man. Not a single English sentence I could pronounce. Like, wow, I can't even English right now. So,
That's amazing.
and
Yeah.
yeah, it was really really rough the first few years trying to learn English. It was it was a journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Before you travel to Canada, have you ever traveled domestically in China for like the colder regions, or it's the first time you go to the colder region?
Yeah, I the only other places in China I've ever been to is like Hong Kong and Shenzhen.
Uh-huh.
Um, that's it. My parents didn't really travel when I was younger, so yeah. Oh, and we went to, our hometown villages and stuff
Hmm,
like that. But
hmm.
other than that, it wasn't like north or anything like that. So it was mostly southern China.
Sounds great. So yeah, I can imagine you just have a different experience here, a whole new life.
Well, what about yourself? Like how did you feel about when you first landed?
Yeah, so my timeline is definitely a little bit like for later because I was here for the university. So basically I finished my international high school in China. I have feel like I have done all the preparations because you need to pass all the like language tests. You have to be received by a university, and like what to expect, kind of, because you're like, okay, I will go to this place and have 4 years of the university at least. So I thought I was prepared. I thought I was prepared. But while I'm just landing on this foreign land, I'm just seeing everything that's unfamiliar. And I just realized that, okay, I may not know anything about this place, except for, the preparation I know on the paper. But when I'm here, I'm actually overwhelmed by all the emotions. Like, I don't know how it hit me. I feel like aliens. I feel like unfamiliar with this place. And actually, nothing happened. Like, nothing strange happened. But somehow the emotion just hits me so hard. It took me like weeks to adjust and to just making sense that now I'm in a different place. I'm having a different life and I'm on my own. The mental shift is crazy for me back in time.
So, did you know anybody when you came here?
Yeah, I naturally know someone because we went to like international high school. So some of the people I know, they were studying here in Canada or North America in general. So there's more people I can connect and to ask questions. And I think my family is trying to also help me to connect some of the local families or some friends they had. I can get supports as needed. So I feel like from the physical or material point of view, there's nothing I really struggle, but it's more like for the mental shift and the mental adjustments I need to make.
You came here to study and you knew some friends
Hmm.
and you felt a little bit homesick.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot. It's not a little bit. That's a lot.
Oh, a lot of homesick. Like what
Yeah.
does that feel like? I don't know what homesick means.
Yeah, it's weird because when I was here, I was ready for the university, right? I was technically an adult. So
Mm,
basically, you have your lifestyle, you have all your life experiences living in China. So you have all those habits accordingly. So
yeah.
suddenly, like, you are transported to a different place, and then you are given a different responsibilities to be on your own. and you kind of have to make your own choices and to be learning different types of people and to socialize with people and to get support. So that's a really different experiences. I actually read something in my textbook because ironically I was majoring in sociology, and one of the first description I have saw in the textbook was about alienization, describing this feeling that you are sailing alone to an island on open water or ocean, and you feel like so lonely, there's no one nearby and there's no one can support you, at least mentally, and to really help you to making sense what's going on and how do you deal with this unknown for yourself. So you feel like you are wandering in this journey without having a firm grip or a firm like handling. You just feel like you are sailing to the island alone. So that's what's the journey to a different culture looks like, and what's a feeling like lonely and alienized. And that's how I felt exactly back then.
What specific examples can you give me that made you feel like that?
Yeah, it's just all the cultural expectations are different in a way because, for example, so when you were a student in China, you feel like you just have to obey the rules and obey the education or obey the people who tell you what to do in a way. You feel like you can always get answers accordingly, and there's no issue for me to connect to anyone, including the classmates and also like friends, because we're coming from similar cultural backgrounds, so we can become friends naturally. But when you move to Canada, you just feel like people interact with each other differently. So you have more small talks, you have more friendly smiles, but at the same time, you feel like maybe making a friend can be a little bit different here, and how to interact with people and how people expect you to respond. So that's something takes time for me to realize how things are working here.
Did you did you participate into any like social groups or any social clubs in university to try to make more friends other than the classes that you went to? Or I would also assume that there's also like international student clubs, right?
Yeah, so that's a fair point. I feel like at that moment you naturally will have more so-called like Chinese friends, like the friends more from like Chinese background, and you are like both international students. So you have a lot more in common. But the
What do you
drop
mean? What do you mean by so called? What do you mean by so called?
yeah, because I feel like when I'm saying like Chinese students, I'm referring to the international students. Those people will have like similar cultural backgrounds, but at the same time, I feel like they don't really behave like fitting the Western cultural expectation as well. So that's more like you have this group of people, you can get support, you can easily make friends, but at the same time, they are behaving
Like they are back home.
like they're back home. So that's a struggle for me.
Why
Yeah.
would that be a struggle? Wouldn't that be like a familiarity for you to kind of feel like home a little bit?
Yeah, but essentially one of my goal is to be able to learn the lifestyle here and to learn the education and the cultural expectations here so I can fit
Mm.
in this environment. I can learn like different things from this journey, right?
So it sounds like your personal experience is trying to like immerse yourself into the culture and try to blend in as much as you can. Given the fact that you are still an international student as a university student, right? Back
Mm-hmm.
then.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting that you say that because for me, like I don't because when I immigrated to Canada, I wasn't considered international
Mm-hmm.
technically. So I was thrown into the deep end, let's just say,
Yeah.
of um just regular schools. Like I didn't have an international group of students that I could hang out with. I didn't have any of
Really?
that.
Wow.
No, I didn't. So it was just like, okay, here's some Asian people that you could potentially make friends with, and I just kind of like went along with that. It was so wild. Like going to school the first year in Canada was so sad for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. The
Yeah.
only thing that I was good at was math. And then, because
that's that's very
it was,
stereotypical.
but it was not even hard math. Like it was like grade two, grade one, grade three, grade four math. Like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
in Canada, but like in China, we're way ahead. They're
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
2 + 2
yeah.
= 4. I'm like, okay, I've memorized the entire times table. Like, can we do something a little bit?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you because I went to international school in China for the high school, and especially for the math class or the physics class, I feel like all the contents they are teaching there was already covered in the middle school we had in China. So I feel like
Yeah.
I don't know why, but somehow we are racing the schedule or something. That's why I think that's part of the reason why people say, oh, like Asian people or Asian students have better math or capability in this case. So I think that's one of the factor.
Yeah, but after that though, like
Yeah.
after high school or at a certain degree, everybody is kind of leveled out
Yeah,
again.
exactly. Yeah.
But after that, it's not so much. In high school, I was not good at math. I wasn't good after that. But yeah, the whole entire thing of like going through school with no international students, I think it just forced me to learn a lot of the cultural exchange and
Mm-hmm.
behavior and language very, very quickly.
Yeah.
I was bullied a lot because I
Ooh.
didn't understand the language, and there was just I don't know, I think there was just a lot of traumatic experiences in terms of like going from being a class rep in China to like absolutely nobody
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Canada. Do you know what I mean? Like
That's
it
kind
was
of my
such a
feeling as
huge
well.
shift.
Yeah.
It's normal where kids bully kids, right? So cuz I'm different and I don't speak the
Yeah.
correct English. I might have had an accent back then. I don't know.
Maybe you can share some examples of the bullying.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah. Because also you mentioned about like the Asians you saw. Like I wonder if they were born here or they're like international. Now maybe you feel like you are more local person, but back then when you move here, it may be different. I wonder like how you see your difference compared to the local born like Asian people or whatever you may call it.
I
Makes sense.
remember I remember this distinct. A few of these interactions was like, "Oh, like where are you from?" And I would always say like I'm from China.
Hmm.
And I think now when you kind of ask me, it's kind of switched. I'm from Canada.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So I think back then, like my Chinese roots was still like really deep and engraved, and but all the other Asian classmates were born in Canada,
uh,
so they did not have an issue with the English language
yeah,
when I was having trouble. So that was an interesting take in terms of where I could be in terms of my language skills with these peers, right? Because they speak both Chinese and English very well. But in school, they don't speak Chinese. They speak English to each other,
hmm,
and they probably only speak Chinese with their parents at home, and that's it.
yeah. I think that makes sense. Yeah. I'm curious. Like, do you feel like they're holding like negative images against China or anything? Like, you feel like you are treated like the why you were bullied. What's the reason?
Okay, so are we gonna? I was thinking we can do this in a different podcast or a
Yeah,
different
like,
episode. Um, I think let me just give you like a nutshell. It was mostly about my understanding of the language
hmm,
and how I pronounced certain words that made it
Oh.
really funny for them to not understand.
Hmm.
There's definitely a few instances. Like one of them was, um, oh my gosh, I remember this one so much. I don't know what was going on during lunchtime, and I think my mom gave me some sort of medication,
Oh.
and I had to eat it,
Uh-huh.
during lunch.
Uh-huh.
So, oh, the whole lunch thing, I could tell you so much. But this one incident, they were asking me like, "Ew, what is that?" And I tried to remember like what the word it was called for y'all, right?
Yeah,
Like
medicine. Yeah.
medication,
Yeah,
medicine.
medication.
So
Yeah.
I think I tried to say medicine, but what was received was magazine. I was like, and the person was like, "Oh, you're eating magazine." And then I just, kind of got
Yeah,
laughed at.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I was like, "No, I'm trying to say it's medication or medicine." So, and then how like fragile you are when you're a child,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
just yeah, it just kind of like broke me a bit. um
Yeah, I
yeah.
was made of glass, so I can relate. Yeah.
You're not made of glass. I hear you're a bully.
Yeah, I think part of me as a bully is also I'm seeking for some like validation from the
Mm,
experience. So I feel like this is a mutual like I'm not like defending the bullies. I'm just saying like bullies can be very fragile as well. So
yes, of
mentally,
course,
yeah.
as
So
we learn when we get older.
yeah,
But I want to know about like your
yeah,
personal racist experiences growing up,
for sure,
because
for
not
sure.
growing up, like when you first moved to Canada, because I think my experiences when I first came to Canada is not necessarily racist, but it's more of like, haha, you don't know how to speak the language. Whereas whereas for you it might be a little bit different.
Yeah. So my experience can be a little bit subtle. That's how I put it because I feel like I was here as basically adult male. I had a big size and I feel like I just naturally will be immune to the physical racist behaviors because I feel like people will have hesitation regarding like how to confront me like physically and all stuff. I do heard from my friends' story, especially if they're girls, they kind of like they often get yelled on the streets, or even they
Really?
yeah they sometimes they got whistles, they got or even they got yelled, and also like during some special times like the COVID pandemic, they got treated really badly when they were on the
Yes.
street and people would be really offensive to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we saw some news as well. Some elderly people
Yeah.
who are from like Asian and they will like push around and they will be they some of them like violate them physically.
They
Um
got hospitalized, and some of them like basically got their lives cut in half, if
yeah,
not more.
yeah. So those are the examples where I start to realize I was pretty lucky, but I didn't experience any physical racism moments. But I do encounter how do I put it? So naturally, because I have an accent in my English speaking, I wasn't like a native speaker. I didn't have the same experiences as my other classmates in the country. So I do see people were treating me more like a traveler or guest or someone they feel like they need to treat me differently. Maybe deep down in their mind, they're like saying something like really racist and say like, "Oh, he's so stupid. He doesn't know anything." But I think on the surface, people will be like really trying to be helpful and trying to be patient, and they will speak with you with lower speed of speech. So basically, they're trying to explaining something with like simpler words and stuff like this.
Interesting that you say that, like slower words or more simpler phrases.
Yeah.
I think there's two ways to look into that. Like the way that I'm looking at it is that
Hmm.
that person is either deliberately doing that for that person receiving the information
Hmm.
to potentially hope that they can understand it easier.
Yeah.
And if it was my mother, for example, who was who was the receiver, them trying to speak English, like my parents would probably not have understand anything. So if they were gonna use gestures or like more simple English language, they may or may not have understood. But I think it would have been very evident for my parents to like at first they'd be like, "Oh, we don't speak English,"
Hmm. Hmm.
um, like right off the bat. But if you just assume and you just do that right away, maybe
Yeah.
that's a different expectation.
Yeah, that's something would be really interesting to discover because I I think there's a lot of discussion even in the sociology like terminologies regarding what's counted as or what's defined as racism. So for me, like if we take a really harsh definition to be like the intention must be hostile, like people will be like aggressive, people will be like so offending you. I feel like that part is fine for me. I don't feel like that's something I worry too much during my experiences here. But
What do you mean by not worrying too much?
it's like I didn't really experience too much of this, like I said, regarding like
Oh,
I
okay.
feel like the hostile, like I feel like people want to, putting you down. Yeah, actually, if you have a wider definition of racism regarding like people are treating you differently based on your race or based on your capability, or
Mm-hmm.
you feel like special or feel like you are treated differently. So that's kind of like more common experiences I have here. I'm personally don't mind, but I can imagine some people may say, "Hey, like just treat all of us the same, right?" In this case, so it's not a problem for me. So I do feel like I'm pretty enjoying my time here.
Well, lucky you. That's good though. I'm glad you're enjoying the better life of immigration. But
Yeah.
speaking of which, is immigration better for people to have a better life when they do immigrate?
Hmm.
Because there's so much, I guess, there's a lot of initial challenges, speaking from experiences, right? So there's a lot of things that you need to get your bearings down. You don't have the right language. Your credentials might not transfer. You're basically starting from zero again
Yeah.
in a certain way. So, do you think it makes life better after immigrating to a new land? Because in my experience, I think it
Hmm.
just depends on how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
And there are some aspects of what happened to my family, I think because of the laws that was implemented in Canada, had more favor towards what is more justified to what happened to my family, I guess, in a certain way because of like divorce laws and stuff like that. So,
Oh, you
um,
mean like okay, yeah.
yeah, so like in that aspect, I think like it protected what was justified, whereas maybe in a different country, it might have not done so. Or,
But when your family moves here, were they planning those things, or what's the original aim for them? I know those things comes after, right? So I
yeah,
wonder
yeah,
like
yeah.
what's the
I mean, they didn't plan for a divorce, but like,
yeah.
um,
Yeah, that
I think
exactly, yeah.
yeah. So I think the goal for so the goal for my family was, at least according to my mom, was to start a new life with between her and my dad, and to potentially give me a better education
Mm,
internationally.
that's one of the
And
reason. Yeah.
I think that's a lot of the reasons, or similar reasons for a lot of immigrant parents for their kid is to have quote unquote better education.
Yeah.
But I
I
don't know if it is better. I think it's better in university reputation,
yeah.
and that's why there's so much investment into the post-secondary degrees internationally, right?
Yeah.
So that's good, but I think in terms of like high school, I don't think it's necessarily
Yeah.
better, or even elementary school.
Yeah, I agree. I just feel like it's pretty common for the Asian parents to consider children's education as one of the primary factors for the immigration or for the international experiences. Because I feel like even the quality, as you said, the quality may be very similar. The content can be similar, especially before the university. But also, I feel like one factor they're considering is that the level of competition and the level, like how much time you need to spend on your study to be able to achieve the same results in terms of the competition. So I think that's
Potentially.
something they worry because for those who doesn't know, like Chinese education system is very competitive and
Yes.
I cannot speak for the past, but at least for now, I think 50% of the students they don't have the chance to go to a normal high school. So basically, after everyone finished the middle school, you will have to take exam to determine like which high school you'll go to. And now the ratio is like 50% of the people will be sent to the high school with specialized skills. Like you will be a worker, you will choose your expertise, and you learn to be a worker afterwards. So that's already happened.
So there's like different tiers of high school happening. So like if
Yeah,
you get a certain percentage on your exam, then you go to a higher tier high school which is dedicated more towards certain occupations or something.
yeah, yeah. So basically, if you don't succeed or if you don't beat 50% of the students in your exam after the middle school, you will basically have no chance for university if you are in China. I'm not necessarily saying like those people will have worse future or whatever choices they have, but it's definitely not a good news for the students who want to go to the university or even higher education eventually. So basically, they will not have the chance if they fail that exam. It can be really brutal, especially when you only graduating from the middle school. You are not even like 16, right? So it's like you're still like a very teenager age, and you already being like made a life choice based on the results of your exams, and you already spent a lot of time in your middle school trying to study, maybe around like 12 hours a day or something like this. So it's a very like tiring and competitive environment we had in China for education.
So in terms of how immigration is in today's political climate, there's been a lot of history that has built up to, I guess, to this moment in terms of how the West is internationally advertised throughout the world, right? So going through history, I guess the gold rush into the railways and then potentially even into Chinatown creation
Hmm.
has been very fascinating for our ancestors to make a living in this part of the world. And I think it's quite interesting to be part of a generation right now where all of these are kind of set in stone already because
Hmm.
those hardships don't necessarily exist
Hmm.
um, as much previously, where people, oh, it's you're the first generation of Chinese, like that's gone to the West, and that's very that's hard, right? That's
Yeah,
very hard.
it's
Like I don't
brutal.
I don't know I don't know how they did it. So,
Yeah.
but they did. And just looking into the history of how Chinatown was created, due to the aesthetics and how it was created because of racism and it was turned into a tourist attraction, made value for the West to realize that there is a market.
Yeah.
And it was quite interesting to understand like why all Chinatowns in the West kind of look similar, or it's got the embedded architecture of the local countries buildings of whatever
Yeah,
business that you're in.
yeah,
So it could be like a Chinese restaurant embedded in a I don't know, of a 500-year-old church, or like
yeah. It could be
it,
something like this. Yeah,
yeah, or there's like tiles of like Chinese inspired things of roofs that kind of like pops out, and then obviously there's
exactly.
like the Chinese gates in Chinatown. So I think those are really interesting to see as all the Chinatowns around the world that have these type of aesthetics.
Hmm.
But when you showed me that video
Yeah, yeah,
regarding Chinatown as being like a tourist attraction,
yeah, yeah.
my my mind just went to how black people used to be
Hmm.
in a zoo for people to use as a tourist attraction
Yeah,
place. And I was
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
wow, like that is that is wild. That is crazy.
It it's crazy. Yeah, I think that video really explains why the Chinatown art style or the aesthetic styles in the Western world is really cannot find anywhere else. Like it's really not similar to what we have in the China, and it's not something like local as well. It's a fusion and it's some new creation just catering to the Western stereotypes regarding how the East may look like back in the old days. It's because usually the Chinatown is occupying some of the good pieces of the land,
Yeah.
and with the developments of the city, people tend to see this place as valuable over time, and so they just trying to find a way to have the developments in those areas or to make it to be a different place other than Chinatown. So that's where like people have a lot of uh, the chess to play in those moments,
Mm.
and that's where the new styles are being invented and to say, hey, we're now a tourism attraction. We're now like, having a unique identity. So we're not here to stealing like all the resources, but rather we are trying to providing the helps to the city. So I feel like that's the whole process looks like. For example, like if people haven't really go to any Chinatown, but they may know some famous places like Chinese theater in Hollywood Boulevard, all those places. So those are very typical Western Chinese architecture that you cannot really find anywhere else. It's an invention based on the stereotypes and everything. So
Yeah, or San Francisco.
yeah,
Yeah. I find it kind of sad that some Chinatown spaces is kind of going downhill though.
yeah,
I I wish it isn't the case, but I don't know why that I don't know why it is like leaving. Like
hmm,
the value of Chinatown is kind of is slowly leaving
hmm.
in some cities.
I do not feel like that's necessarily a bad thing in the long run or in the higher picture because I think we had some previous discussion regarding like one of the main characteristics or one of the main like feature of the Chinatown is it has all those functional areas or units that helps to serve the community. You can find all the like local banks and local like grocery store and local like uh
Services.
services like the mails, all those things, all in one small Chinatown.
Yeah.
So I was confused in the first place, and then I saw some studies in the sociology. People are claiming that, oh, the reason why we have this complete structure is that because people back then, in the earlier ages, they have struggles. It was really difficult for the Chinese immigrants to have access to those services outside of the Chinese community or Chinatown. So that's
Hmm.
why they have all those functions in one place and to trying to survive as a group of people together. I think That makes sense to me.
Mhm.
In this case, I feel like now some of those area or some of those region is dying. It's probably because they don't have to rely on the internal functions. They can get access to the resources outside, and they can go to any like other bank branches or or like like those mailing systems to help them to finish the things they want. So there's no reason for them to maintaining our independent like brand for those services. So maybe that's part of the reason why it's declining. But of course, from a cultural perspective, I feel like that's a loss for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope there's going to be some sort of revamp to
Hmm.
Chinatown. I think it would be such a shame to just be completely become like a a ghost Chinatown.
Yeah. I also heard some proposals. People are thinking to turn those places into the museums and to just keep the equipment, to keep the facility and the building as well as it was, but turning more
Mhm,
like a historical museum because it's no longer operating commercially, but it has the
mhm.
historical and arts value based on that as well.
I speaking of um so I think in the current political climate, being an Asian and trying to pay attention to the politics
It's
of
hard.
today's world is rough. It
Yeah.
is hard and it's um and I think it's a very normal thing, especially for Asians in the West, to kind of not participate
Hmm.
in political stances or debates or whatever. But I think that's kind of changing in a very, very small percentage, especially for those who have a background in other Asian countries that have a say in politics. So, such as like
Hmm.
places in Hong Kong, and people who come to the West,
Wow.
they more or less understand a little bit more about what they can do as citizens to affect politics that could
Hmm.
affect their lives,
Hmm.
whereas other parts of Asia might not. And I don't know about you, but like I think we chatted about this last time, but like it's hard
Hmm.
for Asians to try to pick the left or the right
Yeah, it's
because
it's really hard.
because one of our legs is from we're literally immigrants, and
Yeah,
then the other
yeah,
leg is we're trying to survive in the Western world, and most of us are in businesses
yeah. The
or
small
in
business
high profession
owners, those things.
and all that stuff. Yeah, so like kind of divided in those aspects. So it's kind of hard to choose which one makes sense, right?
Yeah, I think you definitely nailed it. I feel like that struggle is something really confusing for many of the immigrants. As you said, as an immigrant, we're supposed to support more like the left wing values. But at the same
Yeah.
time, many of us are property owners and we value like the business values in this world. So that could be more right wing ideas. So this conflict can be very interesting because many of the Asian immigrants they care about the immigration policies to be more accessible, so they have a chance to stay here. So in that case, they may support the left, right? But they want to have less taxes on their properties, so that will be pushing them to the right. So yeah, it's a dilemma. That's probably why the reason we saw this huge divide in the political figures we have here from the Asian community at least. And and also yeah, I just want to mention that the East Asian people, or at least for the Chinese people, we have a very different views on the politics.
Hmm.
Um, because we have less exposure to the election method of the politics, like we have here in the West. So basically, in China, as you can imagine or you heard, people pay a lot of attentions to the politics to understand what's the future, what's the trend, and what's the focus for those policies.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we don't really pay a lot of attention regarding how those decisions were made. So that's very different because from the West, you feel like, okay, I'm a citizen. I need to participate. I need to make my own choices. I want to make sure my voice is heard. But that's a different culture in China. So that's why you see we don't really have a clear political voices here in Western society that representing the China or Asian groups. And I feel like many people are choosing to be not participating because many people are thinking to keep their Chinese nationality or Chinese passport because it's China doesn't allow like dual citizenship. So if you have a Canadian or the U.S. like citizen, you have to give up your Chinese nationality, and it will create a lot of trouble if you travel back to China to visit your family. So that's why many people just choose to have a green card or the Maple card, which is PR, permanent residency, to keep that status. And as a PR person or as a person like who holding the work permit, we don't really have a right to vote as a citizen.
Okay.
I feel political participation and having the trust in raising the voices and to gather more supports from the Asian community. It's something that's really lacking in this modern political schemes. I don't feel like people are comfortable in discussing like political topics and have a very reasonable discussion or debates on those sort of topics. So people just tend to be like distant themselves from those topics at all in general.
Mm.
Yeah. Do you feel like the first generation or the people like you, in your status will have higher like political participation rates or compared to the immigrants?
I think immigrants wouldn't really have participation towards what's happening politically. I just because they don't have initial rights to vote or have a voice to say much, right? I mean, they can protest, but they can't really do much in terms of voting because of their status.
Hmm.
But after they getting their citizenship, I feel like they might not participate either just because they just don't think there's much to change or it doesn't really affect them. They're like, oh, like, whatever happens, happens. We just have to adjust our lives according to the changes.
Hmm.
And I think that's quite normal for immigrants to do that. And I think first to second generations after that would be more likely to participate in political stances and opinions and all that stuff just because they are more. I think the identity is a little bit different.
Yeah, you treat yourself more like a Canadian or the U.S. citizen after generations, right?
Yeah, and then I think it's because of the upbringing from home. If you're in a different generation, then your family might have an influence as to like which political party might have a better view or like which political party you are more inclined to vote for. But for immigrants, I think they just want to sort their lives out in the new
Yeah.
land that they just landed in. Like that's their
Hmm.
focus and how to like leave things behind,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And try to focus on like rebuilding their lives. So whatever happens, they need to readjust their policies. Like, oh, I suddenly have to pay 10% more tax. They're like, okay, well, there's nothing else I can do about it, Then
Hmm. Hmm.
that's just how the reality of their lives becomes
Yeah.
that type of reality because they can't do anything about it. So
Yeah.
all they can focus on is creating a new build and stuff like that.
I wonder, do you feel like for the people with your status, you already identify yourself as a Canadian, also you are like a younger generation, do you feel like the friends you know or the people you know have higher participation in the politics in general?
I I think my peers definitely do, especially those who were born in the West.
Mm-hmm.
They probably have more of a political stance of like what they think or they know who they want to vote for
Mm-hmm.
according to their values and what their job background, professional background is, and like how they want the country to be ran and which human rights are more correct for them.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know, I think my group of friends is very more towards about human rights rather
Mm-hmm.
than the other business,
Spectrum, other part of
the other spec.
spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's not necessarily bad. And my dilemma is like we need both, right?
Yeah.
Like we need
True.
both to survive, and I don't think we can't exist one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes living, at least in my opinion, just a little bit more nicer for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of what your background is, I think we're just moving towards a direction that is relatively feels like we're moving backwards a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
It's like we had like a step forward, now we're moving two steps back kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the next part of this episode, I think we're going to focus a little bit more about how the immigration affects political aspects in the West.
Yeah.
At least for
And
me, it's more of a personal experience.
I feel like it's quite interesting, right? Like the political influences or the changes are affecting both regarding if there be more immigrants wanting to move to the Western world, and also it affects how their life here in the West. So it's a very interesting dynamic we are seeing,
Mm,
especially for me because I tend to see myself as an outsider because I have the
okay.
experience of both worlds. So I feel like I have some interesting observations in this part. Yeah,
Mm.
go
Yeah, I
ahead.
would love to get your observations for that.
Yeah. So do you want to take a break before that, or what's your
Yeah, let's take a break.
yeah?
Let's take a break.
Well, thanks for turning Pondering Pandas.
If you like this episode, please share it with your friends. Give us a comment, like, and a 5-star review if you could. This would really help us grow. We really appreciate you pondering with us today.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.